Hey everybody, it's Mr. Conway, and I'm going to record a video on the last little part of sensation, which is going to focus on hearing and also your other senses. Okay, now I am in the 4.3 section of your ebook, printed page 133, if you want to follow along, and I'm just going to kind of go through the high points of what you need to know about the sensation of hearing. Okay, so let's actually click over to page 134 and talk about the stimulus input. Okay, so remember, stimulus is anything in the environment that can be detected by your five senses. So in this case, the sense that we're thinking about is your hearing. Okay, and just like the visual stimulus input, it's also going to be a wave for your auditory input. So you can see here that your ears detect sound waves. You've probably heard that before. Okay, and we're also going to look at what those wavelengths and amplitude measurements do. Okay, um, something you're probably familiar with is SoundCloud, and you know when the song's about to get loud because you all tell me that the sound waves get really big. Okay, that's when all the bass comes in and the loud music comes in. That's because the height of a wave is called the amplitude, and that actually measures the loudness of the sound. So if you have something really small, that's going to be very quiet. Okay, a large amplitude, remember, from top to bottom, is going to be loud. Okay, the other thing is the frequency. Now, this is a little different. I told you to think of wavelength as also in frequency because wavelength is going to be how the light waves determine the length from one top of the wave to the other, but the sound, they call it frequency. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit different, but it's essentially the wavelength, and the wavelength is the frequency. Frequency is wavelength. You should be able to interchange those, and that'll be okay. This measures the pitch. So if you have a very tiny, small frequency, if they're really close together, it's going to be a very high pitched sound. Think of like a dog whistle. Okay. If you have a long frequency or a long wavelength, it's going to be a very low pitch. Okay. So please be able to recognize those and also relate them back to the light waves. Okay. All right. Let's look at figure 4.19. This is going to be about as important as the retina picture was because this is going to show the structure of the ear and also where transduction happens. Okay. Now, we don't really have to know too big of a process like light enters the eye, ganglions, rods and cones, bipolar cells, but we do have a couple structures that we do need to pay attention to. The ear is broken down into three sections. You have the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear is what you can see all the way down the ear canal to your eardrum. Okay. The middle ear is going to be the middle ear bones. So we talked about that a little bit in class. The ear bones are a tiny structure of bones called the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. And what they do is they take the vibrations from the eardrum and they amplify it to the cochlea. Okay. Now, everyone, I always love saying that this sounds like Coachella. A student said, "Hey, that's actually a good mnemonic because Coachella is a music festival and you listen to music. So you know who you are if you pointed that out. Good job." So while we don't have a lot of those specific cells, you do need to know that sound waves, kind of like if you look at figure 4.19, they enter the ear. Okay, they funnel their way through the eardrum. Then the sound is amplified through those ear bones, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, and then they get to the cochlea. Now the cochlea is it looks like a snail shell. It's coiled and it's filled with fluid and tiny little hair fibers. Okay, and so what happens is the sound waves, once they go through the eardrum, the middle ear bones, and then they get to the cochlea, they stimulate. They're stimulated based on what the frequency of the what the wave is, and so you may look ahead at some of our hearing theories, and that's how we hear. So if you scroll down to the picture, I don't think it has a number to it, but this microscopic thing with yellow looking, it looks like it's underwater. those yellow things are your hair cells. It's pretty weird. Okay. And so when these vibrate, this is what detects the sound wave, and then that process of transduction occurs in the cochlea. So this is why I'm saying that the cochlea is basically the retina of the ear, and that's because transduction occurs here. Okay. Um, Now scroll on down, and here is a decibel level. So figure 4.20 talks about where you're kind of in danger of permanent hearing loss. So a busy street corner is pretty loud at 80 decibels. Once you get to like a subway train, if you've ever been to a really old subway, when I was in San Francisco, it was really loud and really annoying. And then up at 140 is a rock and roll concert. Been to a lot of those, and now I wear earplugs. So I want you to, we're going to talk about how we perceive pitch. Okay, so there's two theories, and I never really see these pop up too much. Your test isn't going to go into them in detail, but it's called the place theory and the frequency theory. Okay, so the place theory says that we can hear different pitches because where that sound wave detects the where that is in the cochlea, wherever that where those hair cells are, where they are in the cochlea depends on what type of frequency is actually stimulating it, which it's really convoluted. It's not very easy to understand. I still, as you can see, I'm probably not explaining this very well, but just know that it's determined by a certain place in the cochlea, and that's going to determine what the pitch is. So it's called the place theory because we hear it in a certain place in the cochlea. The frequency theory is going to say that the frequency, which is, remember, the wavelength, so the rate of the wave, is going to stimulate certain hair cells in the cochlea. Therefore, it's going to give off a certain frequency or pitch. So the frequency is all about monitoring that wavelength, where the place theory is going to be more about where in the cochlea it's stimulated. You're really only going to need to know that these are the two theories and be able to identify them. I don't have any really test questions about having to explain them. It's just, I think they recognize that it's pretty kind of confusing. Okay. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about, if you scroll down, how we locate sounds. This is pretty cool. So actually, when we can determine where someone is, if they're calling our name, we turn our heads and we look for it. Or if we're trying to locate something that we hear, we turn a certain way. And that's because the sound waves enter one ear faster than the other. So it's kind of intuitive. It makes sense. If somebody is on your right side and they say your name, that's going to go into your right ear faster than the left. So the fact that it gets into that ear quicker, you know to turn and look in that direction. That's called localization of sound. So we can locate where that sound is coming from. Now, it becomes difficult when, have you ever heard an airplane and you look up in the sky and you have no idea what direction it is? You find yourself kind of like, where is it? And that's because when things are overhead, they don't go to one certain ear faster than the other. They may come to both. So we're actually looking around because we're not sure what direction it's in. It may sound like it's in one direction, it's in the other. So this is good. Little did you know, when you used to play Marco Polo in the pool or anything like that, you were actually using localization of sound. Okay, let's go on to hearing loss. There's a really interesting close-up in the textbook if you want to read that about deaf culture and about the ethics of cochlear implants. You may think that if a child is born deaf, that would be something that they would really benefit from, but you'd be surprised. You may have a different viewpoint after reading that. Okay, so I'll let you check that out. Now, I'm on printed page 138, and I want to talk about the two types of hearing loss. So the first one is going to be conduction hearing loss, and this is when the system in your ear that amplifies the sound waves to the cochlea, this is when that system gets damaged. So this is going to be like the eardrum being punctured, or if your tiny ear bones lose the ability to vibrate, then you'll have conduction hearing loss. Okay. This means that your cochlea in the process of transduction is still working fine, but the problem is the sound's not really being amplified to the cochlea. So this is fixed with hearing aids, which you may have seen. Um, People that are a bit older have hearing aids, and all it does is it really just amplifies the sound waves. And a lot of people complain about hearing aids that they're not that great is because they amplify everything. And some of you have said, well, isn't that what it's supposed to do? Yes, but sometimes it doesn't prioritize and you may hear traffic or other conversations. It may just be too loud, and when you turn it down, then you don't hear what you're trying to hear. So it can be a little frustrating. So please don't think that you can damage your hearing and just wear hearing aids, because it's not all it's cracked up to be, wearing hearing aids. Now, the actual damage to the cochlea or the hair cells, this can result in nerve deafness. So this is going to be sensory neural hearing loss, and this is going to be um, like really loud, ear splitting music. Okay. This could also be even when you age, and it could be it could be hereditary, to have nerve deafness in the ear when you get older. But this can be the only thing that you can do to restore that hearing is a cochlear implant, which is an electronic device that is actually put inside, and it helps translate the sounds into electrical signals, which is actually pretty cool. But I want you to read that "Living in a Silent World" and see if you can see why. Um, and underneath it, where it says the use of cochlear implants is hotly debated, it's pretty interesting about deaf culture, and why they would think that could kind of take away from it. So I think I'm going to end this one here, and I'm going to do the other senses all on one video. So thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will get started on the next one. Thank you.